The colonel sits at his wooden desk, brow furrowed as he eyes the papers that sit before him. The sun glares harshly into his quarters, and in response to it caressing his pale skin, he draws the blinds that rest behind him, letting out a small cough as the dust tickles his nostrils. Donning the hood of his robe for good measure, he snaps his fingers, immediately tidying the area. A dirty workspace is no workspace at all. His mother's words reverberated in his head. That was all he could hear for the moment, as the barracks, once rife with the screeches of drill sergeants barking their training exercises, is now eerily silent as the war engulfed the entire nation. The room in which he inhabits 2/3 of the day is shelved with textbooks and novels inherited by his previous superior, with a bird cage hiding in the corner where the light fails to reach. On his table lies an ever-growing mess of scattered files with reports of each and every update he has been given in the past week. One by one, each skirmish and supply request has been carefully documented and addressed, and the older papers have been stored neatly in extra-dimensional space. The only other object to rest on his workplace is a large crimson tome, decorated ostentatiously with expertly cut gemstones engraved in its cover to form its title, Revelations of the Prism, a graduation gift from his university's headmistress. The book has unfortunately served as nothing more than mere paperweight for the past week. With a quick wave of his hand, he organizes these papers into 4 neat stacks: inbound Viridia, inbound Umbra, outbound Viridia, outbound Umbra, then sorted again by date. He picks up the most recent addition to his list of chores, as he would jokingly refer to them, before releasing an audible sigh.
3 more shipments of rations requested for the Western Front. That's the 4th request for supplies this week. Our own lines grow as thin as it is. Why does Umbra keep expecting us to supply both armies?
Shaking his head in disappointment, he grabs his quill and dips it twice, then begins to wax philosophical on the parchment. However, his response is cut short when 3 hurried knocks beckon his attention.
Enter,
he speaks, as an elven man accepts his request, visibly confused and frustrated. His attire is tattered, his fatigues held together by haphazard stitching. His face has barely begun to recover from the bruises he suffered during his campaign, and scars run like the roots of a tree down his arms. Though elves from all walks of life tend to prefer their hair flowing freely, his barely makes it past his ears. He steps cautiously, understanding that though the man behind the desk is easily 100 years younger than he, the elf is outranked 3 times over. The glass vials on his bandolier clink as he approaches, sloshing their imprisoned solutions. His right hand clenches the satchel draped over his shoulder and resting against his waist, filled to the brim with reagents, salts, and the occasional mutagen, while the left clutches a dossier.
At ease,
the officer commands as the elf takes a seat.
Colonel.
The elf begins.
I read your report. The casualty count. It can't be right, can it? Only a couple of 100 civilians lost. I expected the casualties of King's Bluff to be in the thousands.
The mere mention of King's Bluff sparked a latent pain in the elf's eyes, replaying the horrid events of only a week prior. The Auric siege of King's Bluff was 30 days of repelling a seemingly endless onslaught of enemy forces would normally be a Herculean task for many, but for Fire Squad Delta, it was simply another mission. The 7 of them effortlessly parried sword and spell alike, operating on a level that would impress any general. Their mission was to protect the town, but more importantly, the Royal Archives, Viridia's most expansive library. The squadron managed just fine until the Auric forces unleashed Hyperion, a white dragon whose presence alone would send even the most grizzled of veterans into a full retreat. The squad fought the dragon valiantly to a stalemate, when an explosion took out the entire city. At least this is what the report details, the report written by the man sitting behind the desk.
I assure you my numbers are accurate. We were quite fortunate that so many were able to evacuate the city before the explosion.
A puzzled look crosses the elf's face as he recalls the final moments before the explosion. The colonel's words beckoned him on the dawn of the siege's final day.
Lieutenant, enemy reinforcements have been spotted at the north gate. Hold them off while your squad repels Hyperion. See me when you're done.
When the elf was asked to carry out his orders, he did what any good soldier would do, obey. But when he arrived, there were no hostiles to speak of. The gate was eerily still, and as he turned back to assist his teammates once more, the library combusted. Flames engulfed the city as ash rained down from above, with the smog eclipsing the sun's ascent. One final draconic speech pierced the remains of the city, accompanied by its last frigid breath. However, when the dust settled and the elf had escaped from the burning remains of the city, he was shocked to see that his comrades were nowhere to be found. He considered heading back in to save them, but ultimately knew it would be for naught. There were more battles to be fought. If he truly was one of Viridia's finest, throwing his life away for nothing would be failing his country. The elf's gaze returns to his superior, a bit inquisitive of the officer's presence during the catastrophe.
I understand you were quite intelligent, Colonel, but you weren't there to tally the number of citizens that managed to escape. Who says I wasn't?
The officer says, raising an eyebrow.
Why else do you think I wrote the report? You were?
The elf was taken aback.
We could have used you in the field, I'm sure you...
The colonel interrupts.
That was an adult white dragon. I would have been crushed in under a minute against that beast. Even with the help of your fire squad, we still wouldn't have stood a chance against the monster.
Though the elf continues to accept his superior's words, he still maintains his look of curiosity. Something just doesn't seem to add up to him. Something seems missing.
You're probably right. But if you were at King's Bluff on the penultimate day of the siege, what were you doing? I was evacuating the civilians through a network of underground tunnels leading to the nearby town of Saltpeter. We dug the hole underneath the library to safely move as many of the books as possible without Hyperion catching us. I am happy to report that the library's volumes are almost perfectly intact.
The elf's demeanor picks up slightly. Perhaps there was a reason to be optimistic.
That is quite fortunate indeed, Colonel. You must be praying to Cade and Kalian every day now, that you and the civilians managed to leave before Hyperion reached the library. I assure you, it wasn't luck.
The colonel responds, almost in a bragging fashion.
If not luck, then...
The elf finally pieces the story together. A white dragon would be able to decimate a building, surely, but to set it ablaze? Impossible. And the man in front of him would never rely on chance. He was too calculating, too methodical. The elf's inquisitiveness quickly catalyzes into despair as he locks eyes with this commanding officer, his brain once again falling into the same hopelessness that consumed him just a week prior.
It was you? You were the one who set the library on fire? It was intentional?
The officer takes a long pause before beginning his defense.
I could not, under any circumstance, allow the Royal Archives to fall into Auric hands. Additionally, I also could not allow Hyperion to continue her reign of terror throughout Viridia. This was the only logical solution to complete both objectives at once. At the cost of Fire Squad Delta?
The elf muttered.
At the cost of my comrades, my friends, my family. An unfortunate but necessary sacrifice. I understand you are upset. Upset? Upset barely begins to describe my feelings toward you, Colonel. You willingly took the lives of your own soldiers. As opposed to what? Hyperion achieving the same end, while continuing to terrorize the nation? Aurum claiming our library and learning all of our history, all of our secrets? We are already losing this war, Lieutenant. I had to staunch the bleeding somehow. So why me, then? Any one of us could have defended the North Gate. Why me and not Captain Lincoln? He's the nephew of Commander Gold and our highest-ranking officer.
The elf stammers, tears beginning to well up in his eyes.
I don't deserve to be here right now. I should have perished along with the rest of Fire Squad Delta.
His fingers begin to curl up into a ball as his gaze shifts from his superior to the ground.
You honestly think Hyperion wouldn't have noticed your squad's captain missing? You were the only one we could afford to displace. You should be thanking me for keeping you alive!
The colonel's voice picks up as a hint of emotion cracks through his otherwise stoic demeanor. He clears his throat before returning to his monotone personality.
This adjourns our meeting. As Fire Squad Delta no longer exists, your service is now complete. You also have earned this.
The colonel presents a silver medal fashioned in the visage of an eagle soaring above a treetop canopy.
This is the Viridian Medal of Valor. You and your squad have earned this country's highest military award. You should be quite honored. Keep your fucking medal.
He angrily scrapes the chair against the floor as he stands, one fist still clenched as he uses the other to begrudgingly salute his superior farewell before storming out of the building. Slamming the door upon his departure, the stacks of paper that the officer so elegantly organized once again fell into disarray. But before he could begin to reassemble the stack into its meticulous order, a raven, carrying a wrapped parcel in its beak, pecks softly at the window the colonel had closed not 10 minutes ago. He sighs, then swivels his chair around to allow his familiar inside. It drops the scroll onto his desk, unfurling it in the process, reading only the first 2 words, Fort Primrose. The colonel lets out an expletive under his breath before reaching for his spellbook.
It's time to go,
He says to his pet, now roosting on his shoulder.
We have a war to win.